Welcome back to Horrifying Stories. Air travel is considered as the safest form of long-distance transport, but this doesn't mean it is totally free from any accidents. In this video, we feature one of the strangest air crash stories in aviation history. This is their horrifying story. Viewer discretion is advised. On August 25, 2010, 18 passengers boarded the Phil Air flight at the Ndolo Airport in Kinshasa of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It was a round-robin flight, which meant that it was ultimately headed back to where it originally departed from the Ndolo Airport, but had multiple stopover destinations in between. Its stopovers were Kiri, Bakoro, Samendwa, and Bandundu. The weather has been perfectly fine that Wednesday morning, and flight has been fairly smooth during its first 3 legs. However, at around 1 p.m. local time, on its second to the last leg as it approached the runway of the airport in Bandundu, the aircraft suddenly took a plunge and crashed just 1.2 miles short of the runway. In no time, rescuers rushed to the site of the crash and found out that the aircraft had crashed into a house. Fortunately enough, residents of the house were not around at the time of the incident. 19 people died on the spot, including the 2 pilots and 1 flight attendant. 2 passengers were rescued and brought to the nearest hospital for immediate medical attention. Sadly, one of them eventually died in the hospital, bringing the casualties to a total of 20 passengers and crew. Immediately after the recovery of all the bodies, air crash investigators began to focus on finding what exactly caused the aircraft to crash land just beyond the border of the city of Bandundu. Phil Air was a local airline of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, or DRC, founded in 1987 by Captain Danny Filemot, who also happened to be the captain of that flight that went on its fatal crash. The small airline operated regional passenger and cargo flights to and from its main hub in Ndolo Airport in Kinshasa, the capital city of DRC. The newly founded airline had a much older fleet of aircrafts, most probably acquired second-hand. Just a year after it was established, the airline met its first accident in 1988, as its Vickers Viscount 757 turboprop aircraft was approaching the runway at Chikapa Airport. As the aircraft's landing gear was about to touch down on the runway, the nose landing gear suddenly collapsed, causing the aircraft to slide across the runway and overshoot. No casualties had been recorded. The second accident happened when Phil Air's Lockheed L-188PF electric turboprop aircraft was flying above the skies of Angola in July 1994. There's barely any information on the details of the 1994 crash, but in both accidents, the impact brought extensive damage to the aircrafts, leading to their immediate retirement. This makes the 2010 crash the airline's 3rd accident since it first started operations. However, unlike the first 2 accidents, the fatal crash in 2010 involved a newer aircraft, the LET L410 Turbolet. The Czech-manufactured aircraft had twin engines and was intended for short-range flights. The aircraft has been designed to be capable of landing in short and unpaved runways even under extreme conditions, the type of aircraft fit for the airline's operations. Needless to say, Phil Air's safety record already was a red flag in itself. The airline was in fact among the air carriers banned from operating in the European Union. However, Phil Air was not the only airline based in DRC that has been banned by the EU. The country's regulating authorities had such a bad reputation in terms of airline safety that the EU has actually banned any and all of the airlines that are under the regulatory body of DRC. Poor maintenance on very old aircrafts, dating as far back as the Soviet era, has branded all DRC-based airlines. To make matters even worse, airplane crashes are no longer even surprising news in the country. Yet despite this alarming state of DRC's airline industry safety practices, pieces of evidence gathered from the crash didn't point to any maintenance issue or safety malpractice. Investigators also ruled out the possibility of engine failure, neither did they find evidence that showed a malfunction on any other aircraft part that eventually led to its fall. The other angle that air crash investigators usually look into is if there was any pilot error during the course of the flight that may have led to the crash. 62-year-old Captain Filemot, a Belgian national and was also the owner of the airline, was in command of the aircraft on that flight. He was assisted by First Officer Chris Wilson, a 39-year-old Briton, who was just starting out as a commercial pilot after quitting his job as a cabin crew of a British airline to pursue his dreams of flying. Still, no sufficient evidence pointed to pilot error as the cause of the tragic accident. There have been some reports that cited the aircraft ran out of fuel just as it started its descent, causing it to plunge into the residential area. However, this was also debunked when they were able to recover 150 liters of fuel from the site of the plane crash. Now, with maintenance issues, pilot error, and fuel shortage all ruled out, air crash investigators were at a loss on what exactly happened to the aircraft minutes before the crash. They believed the aircraft stalled and spinned as it nosedived into the crash site. The real cause of the crash was a mystery at first, until months later when the investigators were able to speak with the lone female survivor of the crash. What the investigators learned of next was totally unheard of. The survivor recounted that the majority of the flight had been pretty smooth, until after a crocodile suddenly emerged from one of the passengers' carry-on duffel bags when the aircraft was on its descent and was preparing for landing. The reptile's startling appearance brought the passengers in total panic, as it started to roam around the small aircraft. Immediately, chaos filled the aircraft, and the flight attendant, out of fear and panic, sprinted towards the cockpit door. The passengers quickly followed her, causing the aircraft's weight to tilt towards the front, and therefore losing its balance. Now, weight and balance is a complex and critical factor not only when it comes to flying an aircraft, but also one topic that must not be missed out in training cabin crew, ground staff, and all directly at the forefront in airline operations. Simply put, weight directly affects the plane's ability to fly. An aircraft that's too heavy may not be able to take off. Meanwhile, balance directly affects the plane's response to being controlled. An imbalanced aircraft will be hard to control once in the skies. The goal is to distribute the weight properly such that the aircraft's overall weight obtains its balance, and at the point where this is achieved, is called the center of gravity. In the case of this fatal plane crash, the sudden shift of weight towards the front also brought the aircraft's center of gravity forward, therefore putting much stress on the aircraft to maintain its balance. With 21 people already at the front by the cockpit door, this brought great impact on the aircraft's stability, especially on such a small turboprop aircraft, and made it extremely difficult for the pilots to maintain control of the plane. Eventually, after much struggle, the pilots lost control and were never able to regain it, sending the aircraft into a nosedive just seconds before it crashed. Apparently, the mystery has been solved. The culprit of the plane crash was a smuggled crocodile that escaped from the duffel bag midair. As if this was not strange enough, ironically, the reptile also survived the crash, but was reportedly axed to death. Thank you for making it this far. If you liked this video, please subscribe to our channel to hear more of these horrifying stories. Also, don't forget to hit that like button and tell us what you think about today's episode. We would love to hear from you. Again, thank you, and see you on the next one.